Welcome to the Resilient Training Lab podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Resilient Training Lab podcast. I'm your host Ryan, here with Paul, and today we have a special episode. We're going to talk a little bit about the coronavirus and how it's impacted our day-to-day activities, and we'll go into maybe a few things that you guys can do to help keep yourselves on track, get the most out of your time, especially as it's looking like this is going to extend beyond what we had initially thought in terms of how long the gyms will be shut down and non-essential personnel have to remain home. So we wanted to start by talking about when it comes to our day-to-day activities, looking at what is practical versus what is optimal. Obviously, the scenario that we're in today and for the foreseeable future is not optimal, but that doesn't mean that we can't use this time to better ourselves and drive progress in a lot of different areas of our life. And so I'm here with Paul, and I was hoping he could just shed some light on what he views as optimal versus practical habits for the time being.
Well, yeah, everyone right now is in a completely different situation. There's people that are still working, there's people that have lost their jobs, there's people that are not working, and there's people with kids at home, there's people with parents that they have to take care of, there's people that have home gym equipment, there's people without home gym equipment. Everyone's situation is completely different, and because of that, there's no like one advice that we can give people. So we're going to kind of try and talk a little bit more broadly about these things and maybe give some specific examples for people in certain situations. But we have to first kind of assess what's going on in our lives and assess kind of the stressors that we have and what we need to be focusing our energy on. And then we need to be setting like practical goals that are aligned with our current situation. As Ryan said, this is not an optimal situation, so we can't be setting these like sky-high goals for ourselves to just be disappointed when we need to be kind of accepting that right now doing something is better than nothing, and finding what that something is and what you can do on a daily basis without putting undue stress on yourself is a huge part of kind of being successful right now.
Yeah, I think it would be really cool just to shed a little bit of insight into how our schedules have changed and maybe some of the actions that we're taking to make sure that what we're doing is realistic and practical rather than optimal. So I know that throughout the week we would spend a lot of time at the gym together. You know, we'd be coaching, we'd be face to face with a lot of clients and checking in with them several times throughout the week. And so immediately this threw a huge monkey wrench into that, and we had to change just the nature of our day-to-day lives to both help our clients and maintain some regularity in our own lives. So Paul, what are some of the things that you've done to keep things practical, even though they might not be?
So yeah, we've definitely had to pivot a little bit and try and make the most of this situation for our clients. And in order to do that, we've kind of put everything online and have gone through a variety of methods to try and keep everyone in contact, and have kind of fallen into this personal phone calls and text messages and emails to try and keep everyone in touch. And our jobs have pivoted a lot from kind of coaching and being hands-on with the clients to being more of a support system and a community and being there for them in any way possible. And we are not able to kind of do the thing we love in being able to be in person and coach people and build relationships that way. But we are able to continue to build relationships by being there for our clients in this crazy time.
When it comes to like your own personal side of things, right, outside of just what Resilient Training Lab is doing, what are some of the ways in your own life that you've had to, again, take a step back and just be practical?
Yeah, so I'm one of those type of people that like to fill my day up with work and with the schedule of the gym, forcing you to kind of wake up early and have some time in the middle of the day to get some other work done, and then going back to the gym and coaching more really fills your day up. And when this first started happening, that first week or so, I just couldn't get anything done and I couldn't figure it out. I was like, man, why am I being so unproductive? And it was because I had no structure in my life. I just was waking up whenever, and then I didn't really have any plan. And then I'd work out, but by the time I worked out, it was noon. And then by the time I finished working out and ate, it was the whole day was gone, and I was just being wasteful, and there was no structure, and I had to think about everything I was doing. There was always so much time wasted just thinking about what to do next, and just so inefficient. So I really had to find a way to create some structure in my life where I woke up and went to bed at the same time. I ate breakfast at the same time. I trained at the same time. I did, some work at the same time. I relaxed at the same time, and made that schedule kind of the same day in and day out so that I could create some structure in my life.
Yeah, and with everything that we're talking about, we're hoping that you guys take away the big principles here. And so if Paul is creating a lot of small victories by setting himself up to just build momentum as the day goes on, starting with just setting an alarm and making sure he's up at a reasonable time, this can be different for somebody who's working versus not working. But whatever our plan is, we're going to get more done if we are well prepared. And so priorities are shifting because of the way things currently are. And so even if working out isn't your number one priority at the moment, planning out those workouts at the beginning of the week can go a long way in making sure that they get done, or even beyond exercise. If there's anything in your day-to-day life that you're having a hard time getting done, just creating a schedule and holding yourself accountable to it will again go a long way in making sure that you're checking off those boxes. And so if you find yourself having to now take care of several kids at home on top of working, on top of whatever other stressors may have risen out of this, we just want to make sure that we're recognizing we might have to take a step back from exercise, and that's okay to do.
Yeah, for sure. Precision nutrition has this thing they talk about a lot called the dial mentality. And you have a lot of different responsibilities and a lot of different stressors in your life. And they can't all be taking front seat all the time, or else you'll just run yourself into the ground. So you as a person might wear many hats. You might be a mom. You might be whatever hat you wear at work. You might wear multiple hats at work, especially right now. A lot of people have had to take up a lot of extra responsibilities at work because other people were laid off. So you might be wearing that hat. You might be wearing the at-home teacher hat. You might be wearing the wife hat. And if you try to turn all those dials to 10 and you try to give all your energy to all of those things, it's not going to work. You're just going to get stressed out and you're going to run yourself into the ground. And the key isn't to be at 10 all the time. The key is just to never go to 0. If you can keep your hats and keep kind of slowly chipping away at it in some manner, that's better than doing nothing. So right now, if your mom hat and your work hat and your at-home teacher hat have to be at a 10 because you're home all day and have to do those 3 things, then that training and that nutrition dial might go back to a 1 or a 2, and that's okay. And that's what we kind of have to do, is assess our situation and be realistic with what is practical versus what is optimal, and then set goals that are appropriate for where we currently are, and then create those small wins we're talking about. So if you're, super busy and have way more on your plate than normal, those goals might be, I want to wake up at 7 a.m., take a shower, and brush my teeth. And those are my 3 goals for the day. Whereas if someone is at home and in a very sound financial position and has a lot of extra free time and has less stressors, they might be trying to plan 2-a-day workouts or something, but that's going to depend on where you're currently at and your assessment of that.
I think that dial analogy is fantastic. If we're trying to be perfect in every area of our life, we're very clearly setting ourselves up for failure. It's not realistic to be able to have your dials up to 10 for all those different scenarios that Paul just suggested. You're not going to be able to teach your kids put 110% into work, especially if you have to pick up extra responsibility as well as maintain your own training. But just to highlight what he said, we definitely don't want to be sliding back to zero and just sort of spiral, even if it's just 2 workouts a week. Make sure you're up, your teeth are brushed, you got your shower in, and just ride that momentum into the next smaller task. I'm finding it's very easy to let the days blend together and maybe be inefficient throughout all of them. And so in order to increase our efficiency, something that I've been doing is trying to maintain a schedule. And so starting with going to bed and waking up at pretty consistent times. We also want to make sure that we take a look at what our entire day's responsibilities look like and make sure that we're just taking care of ourselves in all areas, whether that's eating food, making sure that we're staying on track there, getting our exercise and sleep, making sure that we're dedicating time to something other than being in front of a screen. These are all a few things that we can make sure that we do so that we're a little bit more efficient throughout the day.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when that dial gets turned to zero is it starts to impact the other dials. When your sleep is affected, you're not as efficient. When you're not eating, you're not as efficient. When you're sitting in front of a screen all day and not getting any time to go outside, you're not going to be as efficient. Your motivation's going to drop, and that time you are spending working, you're not going to get as much done. So sometimes being able to step back and give yourself that time to do the things you need to be healthy and to function in an optimal manner, then you start to kind of fade off and everything else gets affected. So by being able to keep those dials, on, and then knowing that even if a dial's at 1, you can still make progress, because again, doing something is better than nothing. And even working out, twice a week, or just eating your 3 meals in the day, you can definitely maintain where you are, and that sometimes that maintenance is progress in itself.
Yeah, I think if we're able to maintain progress through challenging circumstances like right now, that's a sign of personal growth. That's a sign of progress, and it'll reinforce your beliefs in yourself and your ability to do hard things or succeed in the face of adversity. And so whatever the activity is that we find helping us reset so that we're efficient, whether that's going outside, it can be playing with your dog or going for a walk, playing some socially distanced sport, right? Like shoot a basketball. Whatever that activity is for somebody, that's going to go a long way. So along with creating a schedule, if we can carve out some time as a little mental reset, I know that it can go a long way in helping maintain our efficiency and our productivity. Somebody who I had a conversation with who works from home, she told me that she sets 25-minute timers. And so she'll work for 25 minutes and she doesn't have her phone by her side. She doesn't have other tabs open on her computer. And after the 25 minutes of work is done, she takes a 5-minute break. And then once that's over, she comes back to her work. And so it's a nice way for her to break up long periods of staring at a screen or long periods of focusing on one task. And as long as she's productive for those 25 minutes, she takes a 5-minute break. And the caveat that she sets out for herself when she starts is that 25 minutes has to be on one specific task. So she sits down with the intention of getting one box checked off or working towards checking that box off. And so these 5-minute breaks could be anything. We could be going for walks. We could be playing with dogs. Whatever the activity is, it should just be something that we enjoy, something that helps us disconnect, hopefully something that helps us be able to give a better effort when we do return to what we were doing. And this goes along with everything that we talk about with Resilient and training with us, is being able to put forth our best effort and being able to do hard things. And taking a step back is absolutely part of doing hard things and driving progress. Just like we talk about taking days off or dialing the intensity down in our training sessions, like, yes, we're still working towards driving change and progress, and we're working hard when we're supposed to. But just like taking a step back in the gym is important, it can be important in our everyday life to also carve out some time in our schedule to take a step back and hopefully decompress a little bit.
So, yeah, you brought up a couple good points there. First of all is, finding a way to carve some time into your day for yourself, and whether that be with 5-minute breaks more frequently like that, or longer breaks less frequently, it's important to give yourself that time. And another important thing that Ryan mentioned there was checking the box. And that kind of almost implies something about making a checklist of things to do. And that is a very good strategy. We love checklists. We love checking things off on checklists. And another good thing we can do with the checklist is create those small wins that we were talking about before, and be able to use those checklists to kind of analyze what's on our checklist versus where we currently are and what we currently need to be getting done in a day. So if you are, completely free and have a bunch of free time, that checklist might have some more activities that are focused on, things that you've been putting off that you've wanted to do. Whereas if you're still working and you're still taking care of the kids, your checklist might look like a normal day, and it might be, work from 9 to 5 and take care of my kid afterwards, get dinner ready, like a normal schedule. But having that checklist there and being able to kind of design your day after that checklist can be a good strategy.
Yeah, something that I had a hard time with, and I recognize that I'm fortunate in that I don't necessarily have a schedule from 9 to 5, is, if I were to start my day and not necessarily get my training out of the way or not break it up, and I were to try and be consistently go all the way through, what would end up happening was it would be, 5 or 6 o'clock. It would be getting dark out, and then I would start to get stir crazy, but it wouldn't be a good time to go exercise or go out for a walk because it's getting dark outside. And so making sure that I set my day up in a way that lets me take a break in the middle, lets me be more productive and not end up crashing and burning as the day goes on, to the point where productivity just comes to a screeching halt. And so I think being aware of our own tendencies is really important, and recognizing what your triggers are, what sets you off, or what will derail you, and hopefully coming up with a solution that will help keep you back on track. And so for me, that was trying to limit screen time in the middle of the day so that at the end of the day, when there's not much else for me to be doing, I can go back to being productive and not be totally burnt out.
Yeah, what you mentioned there was super important, and that's kind of assessing the things you're currently doing and finding what's working and what's not working, and continuing to do the things that are working and trying to change the things that aren't working. And another big thing you brought up there was productivity. And I think there's this, like, when you look on the internet, depending on who you see, there's people saying, oh, if you're not being productive right now, you're a piece of shit. And there's other people saying this isn't the time to be productive because there's a lot of other stressors. And they're both wrong, because it depends on the person. You can't just make a blanket statement like that. Some people are in a position where, like I said before, that they are, financially stable. They have a lot of extra free time and they want to pick up new hobbies, and they're not as stressed out, and they don't have loved ones in danger or whatever it is. Their stressors are low, and it's a great time for them to be productive. But for other people, this is a super stressful time, and that's okay. And you need to recognize, where you are on that and plan accordingly. No one is going to be as productive as normal, and you have to kind of let yourself be okay with that. Again, it comes back to something is better than nothing, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just finding where you are and doing what you can to try and be a little bit better every day.
Yeah, I think that fits with whatever our we would consider our mission statement, right? Is like, be self-aware, assess where you're at, assess where you're falling short or you're not where you want to be, and come up with a game plan to make those changes. And it's not that you need to be immediate and go from, okay, this is a problem and now it's fixed and I'm perfect again, but taking small steps to ensure that you're getting better we're more efficient day by day is going to be more important than not even recognizing or trying to ignore those. I don't want to call them shortcomings, but ignoring those speed bumps or obstacles that are currently eating up a lot of your time. So I know we talked a lot about sort of principles of this, or maybe a broad approach to becoming more efficient with our current scenario. And so one of the things that we've always been trying to get people to do, obviously, is to get people to stay moving, to get people to continue exercising. And that can be very difficult for some people right now who don't have the equipment that they necessarily are used to using.
Yeah, we talk about kind of trying to get a little bit better every day. And, sometimes even that gets in this situation might be too much for some people, where it's not that we need to get better every single day, but like you said, it's a process where we're trying to get better over the long term, and that we're trying to move forward continually. And there's going to be good days and there's going to be bad days, and the longer this lasts, it's people, it wears on your emotions, and we have a lot more stressors on us, and there's going to be probably more bad days than in your normal life. And again, it's a kind of assessing our situation and accepting that. And then beyond that, there's things we can do that just generally will keep us healthier and less stressed and more mentally clear to deal with all of this extra chaos.
Yeah, and I think that when it comes to everything that has been going on, just like we talked about the dials, not to bring that up again, but like there are going to be bad days. Yes, not every day is one that needs to actually be like a step forward, but we should have the mindset and the approach to this and the resilience that we just bounce back. Like, bad day hits us, all right, move past it, recognize that it happened, it's going to happen, it's a part of life, and don't let it snowball. I think I've seen a lot of snowballing over the last month that we might consider catastrophizing. And I think that if we can just create little habits or routines that help us, again, just bounce off the bad days and keep moving forward and keep driving change and making progress, we'll be better in the long run for that. Now, that's not to say that it'll be easy. It'll be very difficult to, kind of force yourself to do something you don't want to do, to hold yourself accountable to your workouts or your work schedule or whatever habits you're trying to implement in your day-to-day life to make this easier. But again, it's about having the resilience and the understanding that just because something is hard now, it's still worth it, and you'll still be better off in the long run for it.
Yeah, that's for sure. I think you kind of touched on the two biggest things that we've been seeing that have been holding people back. And that's one is that striving to be perfect, and this is kind of what we've been talking about the whole time. This isn't the time to be perfect, and being able to accept that and still try to make progress where there is progress to be made. And the other is that snowballing or catastrophizing is letting, one bad thing turn into two bad things to turn into three. And then all of a sudden everything is out of your control and you're in a hole that's extremely hard to dig yourself out of. And, they're kind of interrelated, even where people are setting these lofty goals that they would normally set in their everyday life, where right now they might not be practical and they're not getting them. And then they start to catastrophize that and let it affect other things. So again, it brings it back to all the things we were talking about, was making those small wins and accepting that things are not going to be perfect right now, and that something is better than nothing.
It's really easy right now too to harp or have this obsessive focus on something that's not ideal or not going your way. There's a lot less outside distractions. There's a lot more time spent alone or isolated. And so if we start to get in these feedback loops of having something less than ideal happen, and then we obsess over it and we constantly think about it and we let it turn into another negative and then another negative, it's this vicious spiral that we can't get off of.
Yeah, and I think being stuck at home perpetuates that, because we're stuck at home and the only thing we're seeing is social media. And social media is the highlight reel of people's lives. So we start to go on social media and, we might not be in a position to work out twice a day and read 6 books and take on all these new hobbies, but you see everybody on Instagram doing it and you start to compare yourself to them. And again, you have to recognize that everyone's in a different situation. And, the people posting the stuff on Instagram, you don't know what their bad days look like. You don't know what they're struggling with because they're just showing you the highlights. And sometimes it comes back to limiting screen time. When you're sitting on Instagram all day long, like I think when we first started this, my screen time on my phone was like, you're on your phone for like 10 hours a day. And I was like, oh man, on social media for 10 hours, of course you're going to start going crazy.
You're going to see some big houses, some awesome home gyms, some great TikTok videos of the picture perfect family.
That wears on you, man. So it's.
I look at it like, if we just tie this back to powerlifting, right? Like personally as a coach, I'm more impressed when somebody starts out maybe deadlifting 100 pounds and works their way up to 300, not necessarily somebody who can come in and pull 315 out of the gate and then they work their way up to like 405, right? It's like one person gained 200 pounds in their lift, and then that person who came in stronger, like, yes, they're lifting more, but they didn't necessarily drive as much change or work as hard for each pound on the bar.
Yeah, everyone's situation is different, and when we get into that comparison game, it never ends well. So
yeah,
I want to try to avoid that, and if you have to, just delete social media for a little bit. Like, you can still contact the people you need to for phone calls and Zoom calls, and like social media becomes stressful, especially right now when people all have their own opinions and everybody wants to post about it. And then you read, one news article and another news article, and then you start to get into that wormhole, and you have the news running all day and you just have no escape from the stressors. And like, it's the same thing over and over again. If you want to watch the news, go watch the news and then turn it off. You don't need to put it on all day and put that stress on your life. So again, comes back to limiting screen time. We're not just limiting screen time for like the health benefits of limiting screen time. We're trying to limit stressors here. And the screens right now are a big cause of stressors between social media and the news.
Yeah. And I know at the end of the day, after I've talked to somebody, I'm just always really happy and proud of them when they admit something that they're struggling with and they recognize it and they're taking the steps that they should be to minimize its effects or not let it derail them as frequently. So like we had talked about, whether it's finding solutions to be more efficient or just keep whatever it is from derailing your day from derailing it. It's as long as the effort is being put towards getting better and moving forward and progressing in whatever area of your life you need to be progressing at this moment. That's what I really enjoy hearing from people that I've been talking to.
Yeah, I think almost everyone I've talked to has been a little too harsh on themselves, and they, in their conversation with me, they tell me all these amazing things that they're doing, all these things that they're struggling with, that they're working on, and improvements they're making in their life. And then at the end, they're like, but I'm not doing this, this, and this. And I'm like, you just spent 10 minutes telling me all this awesome crap, and then you're going to say, but at the end. So it's like, again, it's just assessing where you currently are and being happy with those small wins and looking back on your day and being grateful for all the things you still have and being happy with all the things you accomplished that day and recognizing all those things. Like, if you have a little one at home and you're working still and your husband's working and you are getting your workouts in and you made it to the end of the day without killing anybody, that's a freaking win, man. Like, accept that and be happy and give yourself a pat on the back. Like,
yeah, that's huge. That's something that I've gotten a lot better at in my own life. Like, as I've grown, is like, yeah, you got to take time to celebrate the little things or to like recognize the small victories. Otherwise, you're just constantly feeling like you're not doing enough or you're not enough. And so I think that's a really great suggestion, right? Take time to recognize all the little wins that you did have, and even if there are some things that you wish you did different or you're hoping to do in the future, just set that up or frame it more as a goal or a challenge rather than beating down on yourself for not having done it, now.
Yeah, for sure. So I think we talked a lot about, mindset and creating a schedule and how we need to stay moving and working out. But let's get to the fun stuff. What about working out? Like, can we still like progress with these bodyweight workouts or without any equipment?
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Wherever you're at right now, with regard to your training, I think we need to take a look at what the ultimate goal is. And so that's going to vary person to person, but the only real trainable quality that we're probably in a scenario that's less than ideal to work on is our maximal strength. And that's okay. We can take a lot of time to develop other aspects of our fitness that will translate when it is time to work on maximal strength again, if that is a goal of yours. A lot of the workouts that we've seen people doing at home can be really great for helping people build muscle, helping keep them active, work on their conditioning, work on their confidence and their ability to get in and out of a lot of different positions. People are getting better at controlling their own body or doing body weight exercises that are really important. And so all of these aspects of fitness, did I miss anything? Can you think of? You probably got one or two, right?
Yeah, we could power.
Yeah, jump.
We could power. This is a great opportunity to work on power. It's a great opportunity to work on kind of capacity, work capacity, joint capacity, capacity of certain muscles, capacity in different positions. And
All right, I'm sitting here nodding my head up and down as he's listing these off. Yeah, so really, again, if we're focused on anything other than max strength, we're going to be successful as long as we're consistent here. So as long as we're putting the effort in to our training sessions, whatever they are, in any of those areas that we just listed, you're going to be able to drive adaptation. You're going to be able to get better. And so I actually had a conversation with somebody this week. He's used to writing a number down in his notebook for a weight that he did, and he goes in the next week and he tries to do more and beat it. And the conversation that I had with him was that this isn't a sustainable approach to having successful workouts, because if you're always looking to just beat the weight that you did last week, at some point you'd be the strongest person to ever walk the earth. And so what we had talked about was, rather than having a goal of doing, more weight, which isn't going to be possible given the current scenario, if we look at just effort level in the workouts, that's something that we can consistently focus on, that's going to take into account all the factors of our day-to-day life. Yes, some days will be stronger than others, but that doesn't change how much effort we're going to be able to put into our training. And so through talking to him, we came up with a goal for him to be hitting his RPEs, or him to be putting in the same effort into an exercise each week. And there might be a week where there's a little bit of dip in performance, but in the long run, as long as he gets better at putting that mental effort into his training and having that mental fortitude to push when things are difficult, that's a skill that's going to translate back to the weight room when this is all over.
Yeah, and I think this is something we talked about with Carlos in our podcast with him, was being able to kind of look at your workout and take the wins from it and take the positives from it. While we might not be able to be pushing our 1 rep max right now, we can do things like get better at doing RPE. We can do things like set up other ways to kind of show progress, whether that be getting more rounds in a kind of conditioning type circuit, or being able to run through more sets without fading off, or being able to hit, the same number of reps each set on your push-ups, or whatever it may be. You have to step back and find those ways to progress and those wins. And there's still plenty of things we can work on. I think we can kind of go into those a little bit deeper. We talked about power first, so power is probably the easiest one. Let's talk about what power is and why we can still work it with the bodyweight exercises.
Yeah, to keep power really simple, it's producing force quickly. So if you think of a very heavy back squat where somebody is moving very, very slowly on the way up because the weight's so heavy, that's actually not very powerful. Whereas if you think of somebody jumping as high as they possibly could, that would be that would fit the definition of a powerful movement. And so the key component to power versus strength is that time component. And so whether it's doing some form of a vertical jump, a broad jump, a lateral jump, or a clap push-up, the key there is that as we're exerting force into the ground, it's happening very, very quickly. And so that's something that we don't necessarily need a lot of weight to train. We actually see in the research that there's a lot of progress made in our ability to generate power when we work with something that's about 30% of what we can do one time. So that's not going to be a lot of weight for people. If we look at a squat, it's going to be pretty close to somebody's body weight. So developing power is going to be very important for somebody in their life as they age. We want to make sure that we're powerful so that we're less likely to fall. It's important in being able to catch ourselves. It's going to be very important in maintaining the integrity of our bone density. And it's a really good way for us to recruit a lot of muscle mass when we don't necessarily have access to heavy weights.
Yeah, power training is mostly done with body weight stuff. So it's like that's not even held back at all. It's something you could really attack, and it's something a lot of strength athletes neglect, and being powerful can help you move weights too once you start to translate that over. So that's definitely something we can work hard still. And then hypertrophy is another thing.
Yeah, to put that even a smaller word, it's just building muscle. So what's going to be really important for building muscle is just going to be targeting it and overloading it with more than it's been asked to do in the past. And so this can look like more weight, but it can also look like more reps. And when it comes to keeping track of that, it's something that we would consider volume. So we can increase volume really easily if we just think of bench pressing. Now we're doing push-ups. And over time, as long as we're consistently putting in the effort and hitting those high RPEs and doing more week in, week out, and as the months go on, hopefully not months, but maybe, what that's going to do is it's going to have a positive effect on our muscle mass. So we'll be gaining muscle in the areas that we're consistently working hard and asking those areas to do more as the time goes on. And this can be really important because muscle mass is something that we lose very easily as we age. It's very positively correlated to, well, I want to say life expectancy, but then I was going to say all-cause mortality. So I got a little tongue-tied there. But we want to have muscle because we're going to live longer if we have it. Can you think of any specifics in the research that sort of support that?
Yeah, so one of the things is the research shows that even with low loads, that when the sets are taking close to failure, RP8, RP9, or even to failure, that the effects, the muscle building effects are pretty similar. So as long as we're putting that effort in, that'll happen. And then another important thing to note is that that's another thing that we can track progress on is total reps in the week. If we're, doing 100 push-ups in week 1 and by week 4 we're doing 150 push-ups, that's a huge amount of progress. And then going back to, muscle mass being important is, muscle mass is going to be kind of the potential for our strength. The more muscle mass we have, the more potential for strength we have. So as long as we're not losing muscle mass, we're not really losing any potential for strength. And if we can even put on some muscle mass, we can increase our potential for strength so that when we get back to the gym, we have more potential for strength and more of a ceiling that we can kind of grow to. And then furthermore, from a longevity standpoint, as Ryan mentioned, that there's strong ties between lean body mass and drops in all-cause mortality. And I don't have any specific numbers to share with you.
Yeah,
but you
testing your memory there. Yeah, and I think that's a really important point too, is that this can be a really good time for people to work on their, or I shouldn't say work on their, but make changes to their body composition if we're thoughtful about it and we want to drive changes in a certain direction. Most of you guys listening know how crappy it feels to be in a deficit and be driving high changes in volume and intensity. So if we're forced to kind of dial back the weights a little bit right now, we can more easily complete our training sessions if they're going to be a little bit lower in load. And again, like Paul had mentioned, that sets need to be taken to failure. This can easily be done without weight. It's just going to end up being, higher in the rep ranges, right? It's easier to fail a bench press when you have access to several hundred pounds versus push-ups. The load is not changing. So we might have to get a few extra reps in there. But one of the other things that we did bring up is conditioning and aerobic capacity. And so as a powerlifter, why should somebody care about that?
Yeah, so aerobic capacity is definitely something else we can work on without much equipment. And that's super important for everyone. And strength athletes tend to put off that aerobic work the most because they think it will make them weaker or something along those lines. And while there is some research that shows that aerobic training can potentially decrease the effects of strength training, those changes or those effects are very, very small in the single percentages. And those are mostly shown when people are doing a very, very large amount of aerobic work, more than I've seen any strength athlete actually do. So they're not great to kind of compare to when there are so many benefits of actually having a higher aerobic capacity. And these go for everyone, not just strength athletes. But the ones that strength athletes tend to care about is that it'll help your recoverability, and it'll help you recover between sessions, and it'll help you be able to recover in a session in between sets. So the higher your aerobic capacity is, the more training volume we'll be able to handle, because you'll be able to recover faster and fit more volume into any given time. And you'll be able to recover from that volume in between sessions better, because your aerobic system is the system that your body lives off of. It is constantly working. And when you're recovering, that is the main system that is providing energy. So that needs to be very efficient. And then beyond that, having a high aerobic capacity pretty much makes all of life better and easier. From the heart benefits to the lung benefits to the immune system benefits, it's far reaching. There's pretty much no downfall of having a efficient aerobic system. There's also research showing that people with higher aerobic capacities tend to live longer. So that is something that we definitely want to focus on. And when we talk aerobic capacity, it's kind of your ability to do lower intensity activities for a very long duration time. And bodyweight exercises and running and jumping rope and things with minimal equipment are perfect to work that aerobic capacity, where you're doing lower intensity activity for a long period of time, trying to keep your heart rate in a certain range, between 130 and 150, around 65% of your max heart rate. So that's definitely a system that we can work with minimal equipment and still push during this time. And when we come back to the gym with a larger aerobic capacity, we'll be able to handle more volume and handle more stress in our training and be able to get back to maximal strength faster.
Yeah, and you started to tie all three of those together at the end there, right? So we drive our aerobic capacity, we can handle more volume because of better recoverability between sets and sessions. So if we're able to handle more volume, we're going to be able to drive more hypertrophy. And if we're able to drive more hypertrophy, we have more potential for strength, or we can just continue to drive more hypertrophy if that's a goal of yours. So it'll all come back to our ability to recover and also do the work. If we have a lackluster aerobic system, we're going to be gassed after 5, 10, 15 minutes of working hard or whatever that arbitrary number is. So at the end of the day, if you have strength goals, you're doing yourself a disservice by not training your aerobic capacity. And then other than our aerobic capacity, we can work on our anaerobic capacity at home. So our anaerobic capacity is a little bit different. It's going to be less about doing something continuously without stopping. And it's going to look more like our traditional sets in a gym, where we're working very hard for a shorter period of time. And then we have a little bit of time to recover before we start working hard again. So if you think of a set of squats that takes 20 seconds and you might have a few minutes in between sets, that's going to be anaerobic in nature. Whereas if we were just continuously moving, that would be aerobic. And so if we can improve our anaerobic system or our anaerobic capacity, again, this is going to tie into being able to handle higher loads in the gym, higher volumes, and higher intensities, again, which is going to continue to drive progress forward. And if we're working on all of these systems simultaneously and driving progress in each one, the overall stress of our daily life becomes less. It's not that the tasks become easier themselves, it's that our capacity is higher and our functioning is higher. So it's relatively less demanding to be doing whatever. So if this is hiking or yard work or keeping up with kids or grandkids or whatever the activity is, if we can train all of these systems during this time, we're still going to be able to make progress in the area of making life less stressful to our bodies.
Yeah, and I think we can really drive capacity right now with the lower stress of body weight workouts. We can really push frequency and volume, and we can choose methods that place stressors on certain areas that we would like to build the capacity in, whether that be through isometrics or through specific exercises like we have in our free body weight workout, such as sissy squats and Copenhagen side planks and Nordic ham curls, and kind of some eccentric focused exercises that have been shown to build capacity in certain areas. And by pushing volume and by being able to kind of deal with outside stressors, this is a great time to push capacity in pretty much every way you can think of that word.
Yeah, and if we kind of tip the scale the other way, everything that we're talking about driving and improving as being important, if we don't do any of this and we start to let our daily activity drop, so something that we consider our NEAT, so our non-exercise activity, if we're very sedentary and we take a big swing in the other direction, right, rather than doing more, we start doing less, we're going to find that overall our ability to perform, whether it's workouts or physical tasks around the house or the yard, is going to be diminished severely. And this is something that can be very difficult given the current scenario, because if we're stuck at home, there's not going to be a lot of moving, not going to be a lot of steps in, and that's going to create a very negative impact, or that will have a very negative impact on your progress when it comes to exercise. And this is something that I think Carlos talked about in his podcast too, is one of the biggest factors that I think helped drive him forward as a competitive powerlifter, is keeping his NEAT up high when a lot of competitive lifters try and minimize it.
Yeah, like you said, it's especially hard right now because everyone's schedule is different and people are used to doing certain things and used to getting their steps in a certain way. And now that their schedule is different, they might see a dramatic decrease in their non-exercise activity. And again, it comes back to maintaining that schedule and creating that schedule and giving yourself time to move and to move every day and move in some capacity every day. Because if you were normally getting 10,000 steps and now you're only getting 2,000, you're definitely going to feel and see the effect. But again, you have to assess your situation. If you normally only get 5,000 steps, don't expect to all of a sudden be getting 15 to 20,000 steps now that this is going on and everyone's talking about how you have to keep your NEAT up. It's, we're trying to keep you where you were. Of course, we're always trying to make you a little bit better. So if you can improve a little bit, that's awesome too. But don't set unrealistic expectations. If you were getting 10,000 steps before, try and continue to get 10,000 steps. If you're in a position to do a little bit more, try to do a little bit more. But don't try not to go backwards is the big thing there.
Yeah, anecdotally, I know for me that whenever some time goes by where I haven't been training, as long as I've been moving and doing somewhat challenging things, there's not much of a drop off. But if there's a few days where I'm largely sedentary and don't take a lot of steps, that first workout back is really hard. And what I've found to be a good way to make sure that I get my steps in is, again, kind of bringing this full circle, is to create that schedule and actually carve out a time where I'm going to be active and go for a walk, because I recognize that one of my obstacles or speed bumps is that left to my own devices, I won't get up and move. Where somebody might have the sort of the opposite effect, where all they do is move. Even if they're sitting still, they're tapping their feet and fidgeting. And so just being aware of what your tendencies are is going to help give you the greatest chance at setting yourself up for success.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of everything. We talked about mindset. We talked about creating a schedule. We talked about, working out and how there's still plenty to be had. We've talked about kind of all the different systems you can still improve on. We've talked about NEAT and the importance of keeping NEAT up. And I guess one other side note on that is that spills over into the diet and nutrition side of things too. If your NEAT's gone down, you're not going to be burning as many calories as before. And if your diet's different and you're eating more than before, that could lead to some unwanted consequences. So trying to, again, maintain some normalcy and trying to maintain kind of what you were doing before. Again, it might not be a good time for you to lose weight, but it's never a good time for you to kind of let go. Then if your NEAT is greatly changed and your diet's greatly changed, you're going to see, the effects of that. So you want to kind of look what you're doing and look what you were doing and look at what you're doing now and see if you're that far off and see what you can do to try and kind of get back to baseline. And again, on the NEAT subject is seeing what you were doing before and setting realistic expectations for what you should be doing now. Was reading, I think Mike Velasquez posted something about how, if someone is only taking 1,000 steps a day, for you to want them to take 10,000 steps a day is just unrealistic. So it's, again, setting those realistic goals. If you're only taking 1,000 steps a day, let's try to take 1,200 steps. Let's try to take 1,500 steps and slowly build our way up. So again, all of this has context, and a lot of times some of these recommendations or advice might be taken out of context, and it's not the same for everyone. It depends on what you're currently dealing with, what your current situation is, what you were doing before. Everyone is different. Everyone is their own individual, is dealing with their own set of problems, is dealing with their own stressors, and everyone has to be aware of that and has to be, should be compassionate towards each other and accept that everyone's in a different situation. Everyone's optimal situation is going to look different right now, and let's try and be aware of that and not compare ourselves to others and assess our current situation and come up with some realistic goals, come up with a realistic schedule, and come up with some ways that you can slowly improve on your current situation.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, just don't forget that there are going to be speed bumps. There are going to be bad days. This is a very chaotic and unstructured time. So just remember to have the resilience to let those bad days end up behind you, and don't let it derail your efforts to get back on track or to make the changes that are important to you moving forward.
For sure. This is an unprecedented time. Obviously, none of us have gone through anything like this. Chances are we probably won't go through anything like this ever again in our lives. So what is to be expected is no one's to tell you what's to be expected, because no one knows, because no one has been through this situation before. So do what you can and do your best given your current situation, and give yourself a pat on the back for it. Like, this is a crappy situation. There's no way around it. No one is running around, with their hands up celebrating. So let's bond together and do what we can to help each other out, help the people that are less fortunate, and just continue to try and push forward in any way we can.
That's all we have for today, guys. Thanks for listening. So you can find us on Instagram at Resilient Training Lab, resilienttraininglab.com. And we're also in the middle of doing a food collection or a food drive. With everything that's going on right now, food banks are under a lot of extra stress, and we're hoping to support their efforts to give food to those in need. So we'll put a link in the description for the fundraiser that we're doing. If you guys take a look at that, we'd really appreciate it. So thanks again for joining us.
Awesome. Yeah, if you guys can donate, that'd be great. We have some incentives for donating. If you are a member, you can get access to our brand new app. And if you're not a member, we're offering support through the rest of the quarantine, training wise and offering a free month of either remote or semi-private training once we get back to help you transition back to whatever type of training it is that you love. So if you're in a position to help out, it's a good cause. Helping some of the local food banks would be greatly appreciated. All right. Thank you for joining us for the Resilient Training Lab podcast. Until next time.